Hello and welcome to this new video. So today I would like to talk about a subject on which I reflected a lot and on which I'm still reflecting each time I'm thinking about the writing of my next novel. This question is to know if it is really possible to have a hero who is not a chosen one. If I asked myself this question, it's because having a chosen one as a hero, it's really a cliche which is so much used, and more so it's used so badly that I wanted to avoid it. But I started to wonder if by wanting to avoid it so much, if I would not end up with a chosen one in facts but not in name. Because the mere fact that I chose to write the story of this character in particular, doesn't it make him a chosen one already? And in the end, the most important question came back again and again. Chosen one or not chosen one, does it really matter? So all these questions I will try to answer in this video. And first of all, let's define our terms. So a chosen one, what is it? Well, it's when the protagonist is the only one able to accomplish the quest or to defeat the bad guy from the story. And more so, he is the only one because he has been chosen to do so, or is the only one who possesses the skills to do so. In a story, there is a lot of ways to have a chosen one, which I tried to summarize in a diagram, even though, let's be clear, this is not a definitive picture of this topic, as many of them can be intertwined. And this diagram is of my own making, so it's worth what it's worth. So, for me, there is 3 big categories of chosen ones. The first one, it's when there will be a prophecy at the beginning of the story, so then we will follow the one who will try to fulfill this prophecy. We can think of many of the Zelda games, for example, which starts with a narrator telling us the prophecy in the opening, and then we follow the story of the chosen one. The second category, it's when something or someone will choose the chosen one. I will call that the chooser of the one, but I want to stress that it doesn't mean that a prophecy is not involved. There can be a prophecy, just in this case, there will be an intermediary, an interpreter if you want, and as such, this person could be wrong, whereas if you start from the prophecy, we assume that the protagonist is the chosen one. So there is several cases of chooser of the chosen one. So the first case, it's when the chooser is a person. It can be a prophet, it can be a mystic, for example, the Oracle in Matrix or Qui-Gon Jinn in the Star Wars prequel. But it can just be someone who chooses, such as the case in All Might, for example, in My Hero Academia. And on this last point, I have to mention that this person, this chooser, can become the mentor of the hero, but it's not mandatory. In My Hero Academia, it is the case, but not in Matrix, even though Matrix is a very tricky case concerning the chosen one. Another chooser, it can be a weapon. For example, it's the case of Excalibur in the Arthurian legends, but also of the bow of Ulysses in the Odyssey, or the Master Sword still in the Zelda games. The chooser can also be the power itself, who chooses its recipient. It's the case, for example, in Buffy with the power of the Slayer, or it's also the case of the power of the lanterns, whatever the color of the lantern in Green Lantern. And finally, it could also simply be a trial in order to select the chosen one. And the third and last category I identify is what I will call broadly destiny. In that case, the hero is chosen less obviously. He is more chosen by events, let's say, which will act in favor of the heroic destiny of the hero, but it's not just luck. In this category, I will cover 3 cases. The first one will be what I will call the call to adventure. Here, I want to stress that I will use this term more broadly than how it is used by Joseph Campbell, so I'm using it not really as a step of the hero's journey, but more by lack of a better term, that is this term that I will use here. So it's the adventure or the quest which will present itself to the hero and which will reveal him when he will seize the opportunity. Because if he was not the hero, he would refuse this call and he wouldn't go. But in fact, Here it's a fake random event because very often the hero was just looking for it deep inside. Here the example are many. There is a lot of examples. Any adventure story can fit in there, but for concrete examples I will take Bilbo from The Hobbit, who could have stayed in the Shire smoking his pipe until he died, but under the impulsion of Gandalf he went into an adventure. He could have refused, and Gandalf and the dwarves, they would have found another thief for sure to help them, but no, he seized the opportunity because this adventurous side of him was inside him. Another one, it's Luke Skywalker, because at the beginning of the original Star Wars trilogy, it's chance that put the droids and after Obi-Wan Kenobi on his path, but then the message from Leia, which was not meant for him, gives him the opportunity to go on an adventure. He sees the damsel in distress and immediately he wants to go save her. Would it be another farmer who would have found the droids? The story would have ended there for the hero. The second case of destiny choosing, it's what I will call the God's will, or either from one god or from several gods. Here, once again, it's very different from the prophecy. The prophecy obviously can come from gods, but it can come from somewhere else. Here I'm talking about the interference of God or gods in favor or not of the hero in order to help him pursue his destiny. Here the destiny is more vague than in the prophecy, which gives generally the end goal. Generally the prophecy will tell you how the story will end, but here we don't necessarily know what this destiny is, but the gods choose the hero as a vehicle of the story. So of course here we can put a large amount of the Greek or Roman mythology. I'll still take two examples to make this point clearer and to show the distinction between prophecy and this God's will. The first example is Oedipus, for the prophecy side, because in Oedipus it's a prophecy. Here the oracle says what will happen, and it happens. Oedipus being the chosen one of the prophecy in a way. On the other hand, Ulysses in the Odyssey, there is no prophecy, except at the end for his death, but all along his adventures, there is no prophecy and he is helped by many gods. And finally, the third case, which is the most important of this video, as it is this one that may answer all the questions we had at the beginning. And this case is the author's will, or the writer's will, as you want. Because yes, in the end, if someone is writing what will happen, then this person withdraws all the free will from the hero, who is the chosen, but from some sort of God creator who is the author. So here, this was all concerning all the categories of how can be chosen the chosen one. But then the question is, can we have a hero who wouldn't be a chosen one? Who would not fit in any of these categories? And of course the answer is yes. There is one case. And this is the one we can call the unchosen one. This term has to be understood as the opposite of the chosen one, meaning that if the chosen one is chosen, the unchosen one chooses himself. So this case is the one where the character, by his own internal will become the hero. In the end, it's for me the most interesting case of a hero, because it's the one which offers the most possibilities for growth and evolution, which finally is the closest to our own lives. A good example of this is Sam in The Lord of the Ring. If Frodo has been chosen to bear the ring, Sam, he's here more because of chance, and he himself chose to accompany Frodo on his quest. No one asked him to. Another example from the one I gave earlier, it's in My Hero Academia. If Midoriya is the chosen one, thanks to All Might, Bakugo, on the other hand, has not given up his wish to become the #1 ranked instead of All Might, and he pursued this goal of his own will. Even though in this story is the antagonist of Midoriya, his internal struggle comes more from him. However, let's go a little further in the reasoning concerning this unchosen one, because if we think a little more about it, the chosen one and the unchosen one have one thing in common, and that's that they are both here because of the will of the author. So isn't the Unchosen One also a chosen one just because of that? Indeed, as soon as you have an author behind, we can say that the character's free will doesn't exist. And of course, I concede that for the reader, that's not really important, because what's more important for the reader is that the character is well written. But that I will discuss a little after. But before going there, I wanted to go even a little farther in the reflection, because as I said, chosen or unchosen, the difference is important in the book, but not outside of it, as in the end, above the book or the story, there is a creative God, which is the writer. So the question is it possible to go above the writer, so as to have a hero with a proper destiny and not with a destiny chosen by someone else? So after thinking about it, I came to the conclusion that there could be two possibilities, but only one would be viable in my opinion. So the first option would be to choose randomly what will happen next, such as with a dice roll, in order to extract ourselves as a writer from the decision process. But first, this would maybe not provide for a good story, even though it could be a very good writing exercise. And most of all, secondly, in reality, what happens is that if we want to choose randomly, we already need to have a list of any random things that could happen. So the choice would already be limited by that, as someone would already choose this list, which couldn't realistically be as wide as what would happen in reality. So the author's will would be quite removed, but not completely fully. And the second option, which this one could be viable, and which I see, would be to base our story on historical facts. Because unless you strongly believe in God, or if you are determinist, in which case for you nothing is random because it's either God's will or just a logic and mathematical consequence. Else, for most of the people, history, it's more a mix of free will and random events, or at least that's how we perceive things, and that's the most important. So the fact that from our point of view there is no author to history, it will help us detach ourselves from the decision-making process by giving an historical background to our story. And that's where I wanted to talk about the works of George R.R. Martin, and more so of the work of Maurice Druon, because let's give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And indeed, what both did, whether Martin with A Song of Ice and Fire and Druon in The Accursed Kings, it's to take an historical frame and develop their fiction. Maurice Druon, he did that in a very direct manner, by taking the real history and using characters who really existed and are well known. But Martin, he goes a little further, because he will use the real history, inspired by Druon by the way, but also from the real history, such as the 100 Years' War, or the War of the Roses, and from all that, he will keep the historical frame and put it in his own universe, in which he will be able to play with it. And that's what gives his story all this gripping feeling that we never know what will happen because it's so unpredictable, basically the same way it is with real history. And on the other hand, I still need to mention that George R.R. Martin also uses a lot of elements which could lead us to think that some of the characters are chosen one. I won't spoil here, but those who read the books will understand who I mean. But for now, since we don't have the end of the story, we can't know if he used this to play with us, because after all, a lot of historical figures claim themselves to be chosen ones, or if he was serious. For the moment, we don't know. So as I said just before, by doing so, these two authors allowed their stories to give us the feeling that there is no author behind the events. Almost as if it would be a real history that would be shown to the reader. That's what makes them so enthralling. And that gives me the perfect transition towards the last point, which is that in the end, chosen or unchosen one, what's the most important? Isn't it that it's well written? And of course it is. So I'll give a quick overview about how to make your character, and more particularly a chosen one, well written. Already, what we need to know is that the fact that the hero is a chosen one, it's not really in itself a cliché. But the way he will be chosen, that can be a cliché, and that this kind of cliché that needs to be avoided at all cost. And indeed, too often, what makes a hero a chosen one, whether it's a prophecy, a power, destiny, it's used as a crutch or an easy writing option by the author. And in the end, the story will center more around the chosen one part of the hero than on the hero himself. In this kind of cases, we end up with powers that are used like Swiss knives and the hero can do everything without fail. Or again, we can see the emergence of Deus Ex Machina everywhere at any time the prophecy needs to be fulfilled. So my advice is to try to avoid at maximum any of those chosen one elements on which to hold during the story. So either by not mentioning them at all, or just barely, even though, of course, they exist. The link between the story and what has chosen the one should be the slightest possible, and when this link appears, if possible, make it appear through the hero, not out of nowhere. Basically, we could summarize that by show, don't tell. The less you'll make reference to the chosen one status of the hero, the more your story will have to focus on the hero, and that's in the end what you want. And in reality, that's what allows from the beginning the use of an unchosen one or of an historical story, because it will hide all the obvious contrivances that writers tend to use, and so that the reader is not constantly reminded what he reads. It's a fiction work. And so that's where I will stop, which is already a lot. And in the next video, I think I'll try to show a concrete example of one hero who's well written versus one that is badly written to illustrate what I said. And on this, see you next time!